In South Korea, a huge fire engulfs two factories in Hwaseong City.
Authorities advise residents to avoid the area for safety. More details on this later in the news. Good evening, I am Gianna Llanes.
I am Nina Rich Yelago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Now for the headlines. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. asserts the welfare of soil health in the country. DOH launches nationwide bivalent Covid19 vaccination. Thousands take to the streets of Colombia to protest budget reform. France and Italy cooperate to solve migrant issues. And Hunter Biden pleads guilty over gun and tax charges. The Department of Agriculture addresses the soil quality concerns in the country. Madeline Villar Moratillo tells us more.
The Department of Agriculture is promoting the sustainable use and management of soil resource in advancing crop productivity and local farmers' income in the country. DE, through the Bureau of Soils and Water Management, launched the first National Health Summit at the Diamond Hotel in Manila. The summit is anchored with the theme Securing Food and Nutrition Security Through Healthy Soils. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. asked the Agriculture Secretary hails the efforts done by the agency in addressing such concerns in the sector. He believes that the summit will be successful with its aim to push collaborations and improve partnerships with various stakeholders.
I anticipate that this summit will spark more informed decisions and much-needed innovation in the coming years. With a focus on sharing information and enhancing programs related to soil health, I believe that we can promote the sustainable use of our soil for the benefit of future generations.
Madeline Villar Moratillo reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. says that the agriculture sector of the country grew by 2.2% in the first quarter of 2023. He revealed this in his speech at the Department of Agriculture's 125th founding anniversary celebration. The said figure accounts for 9.1% of the country's total gross domestic product, or GDP. President Marcos, who serves as the agency's secretary, urges other officials to strive to address the challenges affecting the department.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. says that the Philippines and China gained progress in matters of fisheries and aquaculture. The topic was raised in the question and answer portion of the 125th founding anniversary celebration of the Department of Agriculture. The president clarifies that the latest shadowing of Chinese vessels with BRP Dagohoy remained only as a pursuit. He adds that there was no interception that occurred like in previous encounters. The chief executive notes that this is a result of the administration's talks with the Chinese government to mainly focus on fisheries and veer away from territorial matters.
We are slowly making progress because the key to that was really the improved communication between the Philippine government and the Chinese government.
Senate Minority Leader Coco Pimentel emphasizes that authorities should focus on enhancing the base standard for qualified nurses rather than hiring unlicensed ones. Senator Coco Pimentel says in an interview that maintaining the current passing rate of 75% is crucial to ensure the competency and integrity of medical professionals. Health Secretary Ted Herbosa recently said he plans to hire nursing graduates who scored a minimum of 70% in their board exams to fill over 4,000 vacant positions in the department. This plan receives support from the Philippine College of Physicians, citing that doing so will help the nurses to eventually pass the licensure test through the training they will receive in the hospital. Pimentel raises concerns about the potential compromise, stressing the importance that patients should feel secure knowing that the medical workers they encounter are certified professionals. He urges the DOH to prioritize improving the salaries of healthcare workers before considering the employment of unlicensed nurses.
The Marcos administration pushes the welfare of the vulnerable population against COVID-19 through vaccination program. JD Mahinay for the report.
Earlier this month, Philippines received the first batch of donated 390,000 bivalent COVID-19 vaccines from the Republic of Lithuania. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. with the Department of Health launched the vaccination program of the said vaccines at the Philippine Heart Center in Quezon City. The program aims to provide Filipinos protection against COVID-19 strains and Omicron subvariants, especially in populations of elderlies through receiving a shot of the bivalent vaccines.
However, there is a very distinct group that is highly vulnerable to these new variants, and that is what we are vaccinating for.
The President extends his gratitude to the Republic of Lithuania for its generosity. He also urges the public to join the combat to eradicate COVID-19 in the country. The chief executive adds that the public must not be complacent as the disease continues to exist.
And so we must not let our guard down. Although the rest of society, the other sectors of our society that have tried to move on and say the emergency is over, and certainly in a way we can say that is the case. However, it is not over completely, and that is why we should not be complacent, and that is why we institute programs like this, which continue to seek to protect our vulnerable populace, our vulnerable sectors of our populace, and that particular demographic in this case is that of the elderly.
DOH distributed the vaccines to its regional centers nationwide. Elderlies and healthcare workers who received their second dose of booster shot at least 4 to 6 months ago are eligible for the initial phase of the bivalent vaccine rollout. JD Mahinay reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The central bank unveils the first coin deposit machines in the country. Mark Tapel for the details.
The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas or BSP launches its first 3 coin deposit machines or CODMS nationwide out of its planned 25. The project aims to urge the public to use their coins to effectively circulate in the country. According to BSP, the machine accepts all coin denominations from centavo coins to peso coins of all series. BSP adds, the machine converts coin into more spendable forms and supports digital payment transactions. The central bank notes that the machine only supports GCash electronic wallet and are still in talks with other e-finance applications to participate in the project. The project will also help to remove unfit and mutilated coins from the circulation. Mark Tapel, reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The Department of Foreign Affairs delegates responsibilities to the Department of Migrant Workers. Vin Pasqua for the report.
In compliance with Republic Act 11641, the Department of Foreign Affairs or DFA will transfer the Assistance to Nationals or ATN functions for overseas Filipino workers to the Department of Migrant Workers or DMW. The turnover will officially happen on July 1st, 2023. The DMW will handle all assistance cases for OFWs including legal or medical aid, repatriation, and shipment of remains using its action fund, with the exemption of countries without resident migrant workers offices or MWOs. The DFA urges that the public approach the DMW for assistance concerning OFWs, documented or undocumented, situated in countries with resident MWOs. There will be resident MWOs in the Asia-Pacific region like Australia, China, Singapore and Israel, Morocco, Qatar in the Middle East, and Northern Africa regions. In the European region, Germany, the United Kingdom, and Italy are some of the countries listed. The United States and Canada are also listed to have resident MWOs. For OFWs in countries that will not have resident MWOs, the DFA will continue to assist them through its ATN and legal assistance funds, and they will maintain assistance to aid overseas Filipino nationals in other countries such as students, tourists, dual citizens, and permanent residents worldwide. Vin Pascua reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The Philippine government provides almost 74 million peso worth of aid to communities affected by the erratic behavior of the Mayon volcano. National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, or NDRRMC, says that the said aid includes potable water, clothes, hygiene kits, shelter materials, and food. The council adds that in 26 barangays in the Bicol region, more than 10,000 families, or roughly 39,000 individuals, are affected by Mayon's activity. Meanwhile, there are almost approximately 5,500 families sheltered in 28 evacuation sites. Coming up, Finland's parliament elects Petteri Orpo as new prime minister. China's Li Qiang warns Germany against de-risking strategy. And Hunter Biden pleads guilty to 3 federal charges. Stay tuned, Mata ng Agila International will return for more global news.
Kung ikaw ay isang estudyante o magulang na may anak na nais makakuha ng edukasyon sa ibang bansa, this episode is for you. In our latest edition, we will explore the possibilities of studying abroad, how to get to prestigious universities, and discuss the advantages of pursuing higher education overseas. To give us the course on studying abroad and running a visa services company, Mr. Ryan Santamaria Everest, founder and CEO of Las Islas Filipinas Education Services, join us as his company from Melbourne to different parts of the Philippines is now open for business.
It's an investment for yourself and your family. Everyone needs to update their skills, their knowledge.
Open for Business with Cesar Vallejos, Sunday, 9 p.m.
Your side! 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Sorry, late ako ha.
Alam mo naman, ikaw lang hinihintay namin eh.
Hindi kasi ako nagigising sa alarm, hindi niyo ako tinatawagan.
Ilang beses nang tinawagan, ring na lang rin yung telepono mo, di ka naman sumasagot.
Tawag ba yun? Ano ka alarm? Parang mananalo ting na to ah.
Ay, naulog!
Welcome back to Mata ng Agila International. Iranians with rare diseases are having trouble getting medicines due to sanctions from the United States. RT correspondent Giuseppe reports.
Thalassemia patients are not the only victims of U.S. sanctions. Butterfly children who suffer from a rare skin condition known as EB, among other people with inherited diseases, are also grappling with drug shortages. There are more than 800 EB patients in Iran to whom sanctions are an unending nightmare.
The US is hurting us with its sanctions. They are limiting our access to wound dressings in particular. Without them, we even can't put on our clothes.
Wound dressings can relieve the pain from our wounds. Without them, we have to use gauze or bandages, but it causes severe bleeding.
U.S. sanctions do not directly target Iran's medical sector, but the banking restrictions make it almost impossible for Iran to pay for medical items advised from foreign suppliers. Activists have repeatedly called on Washington to exempt humanitarian supplies from the list of its anti-Iran sanctions, but to no avail. While the U.S. has assured that Iran's health sector is exempt from its measures, activists say this is a big lie, as the sanctions have scared away many foreign medical firms from Iran's market.
It's just a lie, a statement on the US Treasury website to shrug off responsibility, because how is the US supposed to explain to the general public that it prevents Iranian patients from getting the drugs they need? And so do the European countries, which claim to be protectors of human rights. I think their claims that the medical sector is not sanctioned is a big lie. It's true there's a document saying that medicines are not under sanctions, but our banks are, and so are the monetary transactions. It's as if they show you a product, but don't allow you to buy it. This is the same as sanctions.
The sanctions have prompted Iran to try to produce domestic versions of the drugs for special diseases, but the U.S. has tried to hinder this process as well by denying Iran access to the needed raw material.
We had a bitter experience regarding the purchase of raw materials from a French supplier to produce a medicine for Iranian thalassemia patients. The French company wrote an official letter to the Iranian pharmaceutical producer saying that they could no longer sell the raw material to Iran due to the US sanctions. When the Iranian company tried to bypass the sanctions to procure the raw material, it found out that the barrels that contained the raw material were embedded with GPS devices by the French company to ensure that they wouldn't reach Iran.
The U.S. government is now facing a lawsuit from Iran's Thalassemia Society on behalf of Iranians with thalassemia and EB, urging prompt action to stop the sanctions from disrupting the flow of life-saving medicine to Iran. So the side effects of U.S. sanctions have taken a heavy toll on Iranians with inherited conditions. The number of the casualties is appalling. Now, as many patients are still desperately waiting to get their hands on the banned drugs, activists here urge Washington to make the life and death decision and avoid taking innocent lives hostage for their political gains. Yusuf Jalali, RT, Tehran.
Libyan authorities carried out the deportation of over 100 Nigerians, sending them back to their home country. These female migrants came from the deportation office located in the Libyan capital city of Tripoli. Libya serves as a major departure point for individuals aspiring to cross the Mediterranean Sea, seeking better opportunities in Europe. Supervised by the International Organization for Migration, or IOM, the deportation was conducted as part of an ongoing collaboration between the country and the IOM. Another deportation flight is scheduled for the upcoming week to repatriate other Nigerian immigrants.
Thousands of anti-government demonstrators flooded the major cities of Colombia on Tuesday. They expressed their opposition to the economic and social reforms proposed by Colombian President Gustavo Petro. The recent protests were triggered by Petro's own call for support earlier this month when he urged Congress to approve his reforms. His efforts to implement labor, health, and pension reforms face considerable resistance in Congress. His majority coalition disintegrated due to his government's refusal to modify the proposals. Critics of his pension reforms argue that they could have adverse effects on Colombia's financial stability and hinder job creation. In addition to the public outcry over the proposed reforms, President Petro currently finds himself entangled in a scandal involving allegations of illegal campaign financing, which he fiercely denies.
In Sierra Leone's upcoming presidential election, Samura Kamara, the main opposition candidate, rallies for unity. He emphasizes the shared identity of all Sierra Leoneans regardless of tribes or regions. The race is closely contested as Kamara aims to challenge the incumbent president Julius Maada Bio, who took the narrow lead in the 2018 election. Over 3 million people are registered to vote, and the winner must secure 55% of the vote to avoid a runoff. Sierra Leone faces challenges including deadly protests, high inflation, and regional political instability. Bio promises to tackle corruption and improve education, and Kamara aims to address economic woes. However, concerns have been raised regarding the lack of clear economic plans from both parties, leading to public distrust. Rukmini Sanyal, an analyst for the Economist Intelligence Unit, says that regardless of who wins the election, economic growth is expected to remain slow.
Finland's parliament elected conservative Petteri Orpo as their new prime minister. Parliament voted in favor of Orpo, who won the April elections and has been in controversial negotiations to build a coalition since then, with 107 in favor, 81 opposed, and 11 absent. Orpo was to be formally appointed as prime minister later by President Sauli Niinisto. He will be taking over for Sanna Marin, whose Social Democrats finished third in the election behind Orpo's National Coalition Party and the Finns Party. In addition, the new coalition is made up of the smaller Swedish People's Party and the Christian Democrats. The new coalition also announced a paradigm shift on immigration. It also aims to establish separate social security benefit systems for immigrants and permanent residents.
Residents flee to Russia to escape heavy Ukrainian shelling in Belgorod region. RT correspondent Che Bowes reports.
Came here a couple of days back to see some of the families, and it was very busy. It's a bit quieter today. But one of the special guests here, if you like, is a little kid called Matvey. He's here with his family, his mum, his grandfather, his grandmother, and they're really struggling right now to find a place to move into, to get out of here. As much as the fantastic help provides, it's still not a home with a little kitchen.
A couple of weeks back at the start of June, I was covering the shelling of Russian villages just outside Belgorod. As part of that trip, we spent a lot of time not only witnessing the destruction of these peaceful civilian towns and villages, but also meeting their inhabitants, thousands of whom had been forced to seek refuge in large centres set up by the Belgorod authorities. It was on one of these trips that I first met little Matvey, just an ordinary little 6-year-old kid busily playing with one of the hundreds of volunteers helping out in the centre. But Matvey isn't an ordinary kid. He and his family had just lost their home in a Ukrainian shelling strike, and he had nothing now but the clothes he stood up in, and nowhere to go but the big emergency care centre that they found themselves living in, provided by the city of Belgorod. Even when we moved on to talk to other kids, Matvey was making his voice heard, interrupting me as I interviewed others in a similar position. He was determined to be heard, and his determination really impressed me and the crew. He asked us if we could help him find a room away from the open accommodation of the centre to help him and his mum to make a new start somewhere else. Matvey's pleas and determination to help his family resonated with me. So I decided to call my friends and colleagues in Moscow to see if we could help out. Their response was as gracious and generous as the volunteers helping out in Belgorod.
So we found Matvey. He's actually sitting at the table where we first met him, and I think he's right there. So let's see. Matvey. Здравствуйте. Как дела?
Of course, you can't help everyone, but that doesn't mean you can't help anyone. The kindness we witnessed on this trip was truly heroic. Ordinary people helping ordinary people. I'm just glad we could help Matvey and his family along the way to a new start. Somewhere new, somewhere safe.
Moscow claimed that Ukrainian forces were planning to use Western-supplied missiles to strike targets inside Russia and the annexed peninsula of Crimea. The military officials sent out a statement to aggressors, ensuring their immediate retaliation. Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said that the leadership of Ukraine's armed forces plans to strike Russian territory, including Crimea, with HIMARS and Storm Shadow missiles. The United States has spearheaded the push for military support for Ukraine, quickly forging an international coalition to back Kyiv after Russia sent troops to Ukraine.
По нашим данным, руководство Вооруженных сил Украины планирует нанести удары по территории Российской Федерации, включая Крым, ракетами «Хаймарс» и «Storm Shadow». Применение этих ракет вне зоны проведения специальной военной операции будет означать полноценное втягивание Соединенных Штатов Америки и Великобритании в конфликт и повлечет незамедлительные удары по центрам принятия решений на территории Украины. 4 июня
Moscow has accused Western countries of directly waging warfare against Russia by arming Ukraine. In recent weeks, drone attacks have struck cities in Russia and targets in Crimea, but Kyiv has not claimed responsibility for the incidents.
Украинские войска продолжают предпринимать попытки наступательных действий на Южнодонецком, Запорожском и Донецком направлениях. При этом киевский режим задействует большое количество западных вооружений, элитные соединения, личный состав которых обучался специалистами НАТО.
Chinese Premier Li Qiang came to Berlin with 10 of his cabinet ministers and was received by Germany's Economic and Climate Protection Minister Robert Habeck. Li Qiang urged his German allies that closer cooperation and not de-risking was necessary in order to rehabilitate a struggling global economy. Germany has been intensifying efforts to diversify its investments ever since they've been burned by its reliance on Russian gas, which has since been discontinued due to the Russia-Ukraine war. Chancellor Olaf Scholz stressed that they weren't decoupling from China, but de-risking their investments. German government consultations with China began in 2011, initially emphasizing the partnership. In 2014, the relationship was even elevated to the status of a comprehensive strategic partnership. China is and still remains Germany's most important trading partner. In the last 10 years, the exchange of goods with China has amounted to around 300 billion euros annually.
我们中德应该携手深化经济技术合作，为中欧互利合作推动全球发展做出示范和引领，为现在这个充满不确定性、不稳定性的世界注入更多的确定性的力量。
French President Emmanuel Macron and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni vowed to work more closely together as they met in Paris for talks after tensions. On her first visit to Paris, Meloni said that Italy and France are two allied nations, and it is essential to work together on a bilateral and multinational level. Macron called for the two allies to continue their cooperation in migration, which is a major domestic political concern for their governments. Meloni and Macron were also due to discuss aid for Ukraine and prepare for forthcoming EU and NATO summits in the coming months. The leaders have repeatedly clashed over immigration since Meloni's election in 2022, in which the Italian leader refused to allow a humanitarian ship carrying 230 migrants to dock in Italy. It was headed to France, where the government denounced Rome's unacceptable decision. Meloni was also irked when Macron invited German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, but not her, to meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on the eve of a European summit in February.
President Yoon Suk-yeol of South Korea met with French President Emmanuel Macron to enhance bilateral cooperation in technology, future industries, and regional security. They aim to promote practical economic cooperation and establish stable supply chains. While South Korea also seeks cooperation in future strategic industries such as space and aviation, security concerns in Ukraine and North Korea were also addressed with a focus on responsible actions as international community members. President Yoon states that the war in Ukraine threatens world peace and vows to actively provide support for peace and reconstruction in Ukraine. Regarding North Korea, President Yoon expresses the challenge it also poses to global peace. He says that North Korea's nuclear and missile threat is an international issue beyond the Korean peninsula. Yoon affirms South Korea's commitment to addressing North Korea's illegal provocations once South Korea assumes non-permanent membership of the UN Security Council in 2024 to 2025. At the beginning of the United Nations' third high-level conference on counterterrorism, UN Chief Antonio Gutierrez says when it comes to combating this global threat, member countries must stand as one. Lani Valdecantos reports.
Through the Global Counterterrorism Coordination Compact, the United Nations is providing practical coordination support to member states and helping countries to implement the Global Counterterrorism Strategy. This, according to UN Chief Antonio Gutierrez. Gutierrez says human rights can be the greatest weapon there is in fighting terrorism. He says evidence shows that counterterrorism efforts that are solely security-focused rather than human rights-based can inadvertently increase marginalization and exclusion. This thereby perpetuates the same conditions that can lead to terrorism in the first place. The UN chief says what is needed is to firmly ground all counterterrorism policies and initiatives within human rights. And this, he says, must include repatriation efforts.
Terrorism affects every region of the world. It preys on local and national vulnerabilities and the instability of political, economic, and security systems.
Lani Valdecantos for Matanang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken wraps up a meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping and other top Chinese officials. Blinken says he dispelled the notion that the U.S. wants to limit China's economy through its sweeping ban on exports on high-end semiconductors.
We want to see growth. We want to see success in every part of the world, including, of course, in the major economies like China. It's in our interest. But at the same time, as I said, it's not in our interest to provide technology to China that could be used against us. And at a time
the State Secretary also rebuffed their neutrality when it comes to the discussion of Taiwanese independence. Blinken also addressed the issue of synthetic opioids.
Fentanyl is the #1 killer of Americans aged 18 to 49. I made clear that we need much greater cooperation to address this critical issue. We agreed to explore setting up a working group or joint effort so that we can shut off the flow of precursor chemicals, which help fuel this crisis and a growing number of deaths.
You said that you have received assurances.
U.S. President Joe Biden's son Hunter has reached a plea deal on minor tax and gun charges. This concludes a 5-year probe that involved persistent Republican allegations that major crimes were being covered up. Julian Bukayan tells us more.
53-year-old Hunter Biden has agreed to plead guilty on 2 counts of failure to pay federal income tax. He also admitted to illegally possessing a gun despite being a drug user. The plea agreement between Hunter and the U.S. Attorney's Office in his home state of Delaware will need to be approved by a federal judge. The president's son is unlikely to face any prison time. One report says prosecutors will seek probation on the tax and gun charges. President Biden and his wife Jill issued a brief statement following the announcement. The statement says that the president and the first lady love their son and support him as he continues to rebuild his life. U.S. Attorney David Weiss says Hunter had agreed to plead guilty to 2 counts of willful failure to pay federal income tax. According to the charges, Hunter, a lawyer and lobbyist, failed to file his tax returns on time of earnings of more than $1.5 million. Those were for the years 2017 and 2018. He owed more than $100,000 in taxes on those earnings in both years. Each count brings up to 12 months in prison and a fine of up to $100,000, or double what he stood to gain by breaking the law. Weiss says Hunter was also facing 1 count of possession of a firearm by a person who is an unlawful user of or addicted to a controlled substance. Hunter has admitted to struggles with crack cocaine and other drugs in the past. Hunter will not be prosecuted on the gun charge, but will enter what is known as a pretrial diversion. This often involves counseling or rehabilitation. Julian Bukayan from Matanang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Up next, Taiwan protesters call for transparency after kindergarten drugging incidents. New Zealand axe attacks leave 4 injured. And UN chief warns of climate change disaster. Matanang Agila International will be back after this short break. Please don't go away.
Gamers na service crew.
Kayo na lang yung pamilya ko. Kayo na lang yung meron ako.
Oo.
Pero ang tingin mo sa akin,
ano?
lalabas na ng gate.
Kung ang octopus ay may 3 puso, ilan naman ang puso ng ipis?
Hindi po, 0.
Ang ipis, kahit inaapak-apakan, may puso din yan. And this is Tara Game! Agad-agad!
Ano nga ba ang kasalukuyang estado ng Philippine sports? Nasaan tayo pagdating sa sports?
Other countries, naku, I compare it to the Philippines. We are backwards.
Pero sa regional scale, nakikita natin na may laban.
Sa gymnastics, kompleto naman ba ang suporta sa inyo?
We have to advance. Ang hirap-hirap.
Pero sa kabila ng naiuwi nilang medalya at pride sa bansa, nakukuha ba ng ating mga atleta ang tamang suporta? Mag-reality check tayo.
Panalo tayo pag together, walang talo pag together. Let's stand together sa Net 25.
A huge fire broke out in an industrial district in South Korea's Hwaseong City late Tuesday night. The fire engulfed the Ensinger and Beston factories, which process plastics and metals. As large plumes of smoke covered the area, residents have been alerted to stay away to avoid safety accidents. Local reports said the fire began at 10:58 p.m. and was contained an hour after. The cause of the blaze and the extent of the damage remains unknown.
Hundreds of protesters gathered in New Taipei City Hall calling for transparency on the matter of a preschool that has been accused of sedating its young students. The allegations were first made on May 14 when parents of 3 children reported to police that a teacher allegedly fed sedative and often addictive syrups to children. Parents have since taken their children to hospitals for checkups, and reports said dozens of students tested positive for the drugs. The protest was organized in the wake of an online petition launched by parents urging people to demand transparency by the city government. After the school's principal and 5 teachers were arrested and have been released on bail, the government has been accused of delaying the investigation, having taken more than 3 weeks after it first received reports of the sedated children.
Police and demonstrators clashed in the northern Argentine province of Jujuy. This after a protest has erupted against the oath of a reform to the local constitution that penalizes some forms of protest. Kimi Oria reports.
images from local media show a massive mobilization of indigenous and social organizations in front of the provincial parliament. The demonstration led to riots when activists threw stones at the police infantry guard, who repressed them with rubber bullets and tear gas. Demonstrators are protesting against a constitutional reform that prohibits them from blocking streets and routes, as well as any other disturbance and improper occupation of public buildings in the province. Protesters denounce this is a limitation on their right to protest. The province is governed by Gerardo Morales. Morales is a presidential candidate for the October 22 elections, running against the ruling president, Alberto Fernandez. Morales and Fernandez accused each other of the disorders. Thousands of representatives of the almost 300 indigenous communities based in the foothills of the Andes have joined unions of teachers and state workers for 2 weeks to protest in the provincial capital of San Salvador. Kimi Oria for Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The World Health Organization and the United Nations Children's Fund are hosting the first global congress to end the unethical marketing of breast milk substitutes. Jeff Sanidad tells us more.
For 3 days in Geneva, Switzerland, delegates from 130 countries will be discussing and sharing knowledge on how to counter the harmful marketing of formula milk. Countries will share their experiences on the challenges they face in fully implementing the International Code of Marketing of Breast Milk Substitutes. The code, adopted in 1981 by the World Health Assembly, has been repeatedly violated by the formula milk manufacturing companies. World Health Organization says these companies place commercial interest before children's and families' health. World Health Organization's Director of Nutrition and Food Safety, Dr. Francesco Branca, says industries are still expanding to push an ever-increasing range of formula milk products on families. Branca says companies use insidious tactics to access networks and influence choices of families. He says parents have the right to impartial information on infant feeding, which is actively undermined by exploitative industry marketing. During the 3-day Congress, countries will develop national work plans to strengthen legislation, monitoring, and enforcement of the code. In Washington, D.C., Jeff Sanidad for Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
A man armed with an axe targeted 3 Chinese restaurants in Auckland, New Zealand's largest city, Monday night. Local authorities say that the assailants' indiscriminate attacks resulted in 4 individuals being hospitalized. The assailant entered Zhangliang Malatang Used Dumpling Kitchen and Maya Hot Pot, launching his violent assaults around 9 p.m. At Maya Hot Pot, one witness recounted how the attacker approached her friend with the axe, prompting an outcry from the restaurant's patrons. People stood up and questioned the assailant's actions, but he proceeded to strike her friend once again. New Zealand police swiftly apprehended a 24-year-old suspect who now faces charges of wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm.
41 people are dead after clashes between rival gangs erupted at the Centro Femenino de Adaptación Social, or CEFAS, in Honduras. Rani Bayuga has more details.
The violence took place at a prison some 25 kilometers north of Honduran capital, Tegucigalpa. Police spokesman Eduardo Barahona puts the preliminary toll at 41 women. It is unclear, however, if they were all inmates. According to Delma Ordonez, members of a gang had entered the cell of a rival group and set it on fire. Ordonez represents family members of the inmates. She says that part of the prison has been completely destroyed. The penitentiary held some 900 inmates. Honduran Deputy Security Minister Julissa Villanueva on her Twitter account vows a tough response to the violence. Villanueva announces a state of emergency as well as immediate intervention with firefighters, police, and military. Rani Bayuga For Matanang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
The United Nations Human Rights Chief raises concern on attempts by several countries to silence human rights defenders and other civil society members. These include those who cooperate with this office. Ken Cruz has more.
In his opening address to the new session of the Council, UN Rights Chief Volker Turk expresses particular concern about attacks against people who cooperate with the UN and try to sound the alarm about rights abuses in their countries. Turk did not name specific countries, but did say his concern included actions by a number of members of the 47-member Council. Council member China is among countries repeatedly accused of intimidation and reprisals by rights groups and non-governmental organizations. Turk says attacks on people for their cooperation with the UN are a particularly insidious form of non-cooperation. He says these can have a chilling effect across the civic space. Turk points out that UN Secretary General Antonio Gutierrez has issued 13 reports in as many years about such intimidation and reprisals, with information about more than 700 cases or incidents in 77 countries. Last year's report included allegations of acts of intimidation and reprisals by 42 countries. These include Russia, China, and Belarus. Turk says 12 of those states are current members of the UN Human Rights Council. He warns, though, that the annual report on reprisals does not provide a complete picture.
When intimidation and repression of civil society is so intense that people simply refrain from taking the risk of cooperating with international bodies, we will receive no reports of reprisals because nobody dares to interact with us. I'm profoundly concerned about this strangulation of civil society in several countries.
Ken Cruz for Matanang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
The UN's top expert on rights in Afghanistan says the Taliban should be held accountable for its grave and systematic abuse against Afghan women. Richard Bennett says one way to do that would be to criminalize what he calls gender apartheid.
We have pointed to the need for more exploration of gender apartheid, which is not currently an international crime, but could become so. And we have noted that it appears if one applies the definition of apartheid, which at the moment is for race, to the situation in Afghanistan and use sex instead of race, then there seem to be strong indications pointing towards that.
Meanwhile, Dorothy Estrada Tang of the Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls doubts Bennett's reports will have any effect of Afghanistan's rulers.
Will the Taliban take the report seriously? Probably not. This is the reality. Still, there is always an element not only of hope, but of possibility. Human action is, to a certain extent, unpredictable.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Gutierrez says the world is racing towards a climate change disaster. He dismisses the global response as woefully inadequate. Arlene Ocampo tells us more.
UN Chief Antonio Gutierrez says current climate policies will lead to average temperatures 2.8 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial times by the end of the century. That is nearly twice the UN goal of a 1.5 degree rise. He says that spells catastrophe and the collective response remains pitiful.
We are hurtling towards disaster, eyes wide open, with far too many willing it all on wishful thinking, unproven technologies, and silver bullet solutions. It's time to wake up and step up.
Gutierrez says the fossil fuel industry must undertake not just transition, but full-blown transformation as it moves toward clean energy and away from a product incompatible with human survival. The UN chief warns that countries are far off track in meeting climate promises and commitments. He says he sees a lack of ambition, trust, support, and cooperation, but an abundance of problems around clarity and credibility. Arlene Ocampo from Atanang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Coming right up, e-commerce giant Alibaba picks Joseph Tsai as its new CEO. Mexico and Colombia dubbing artists confront AI threat. And singer-songwriter Taylor Swift announces Eras Tour international dates. Catch more news in business, tech, sports, and entertainment when we return.
Susunod sa Counterpoint, kikilalanin natin ang kalihim ng Departamento ng Turismo. Ano ba ang mga reformang isinusulong niya upang mapalakas ang turismo sa bansa?
Filipinos are already very well known all over the world, especially in terms of our hospitality, our smiles, the love and compassion with which we treat our guests.
At paano nga ba binago ng pandemya ang industriya ng turismo? Kasama si Secretary Cristina Garcia Frasco. Miyerkules, alas 10:30 ng gabi dito sa Net 25. Tanungin natin ang ating mga sarili kung tayo nga ba ay malaya sa lahat ng aspeto ng buhay?
Panalo tayo pag together, walang talo pag together. Let's stand together sa Net 25.
To revive growth in the post-COVID era, Alibaba Group Holding Limited is replacing 8-year veteran chief Daniel Zhang with 59-year-old Joseph Tsai as group chairman. Zhang's shocking departure comes after the tech giant announced its plans to split its business into 6 separate units, a radical change in the 24-year history of Alibaba, known as the Amazon of China. Tsai, formerly the executive vice chairman and who co-founded Alibaba in 1999, is a Taiwanese Canadian who owns the Brooklyn Nets of the NBA, among other sports investments. He has a reported net worth of $8.1 billion. Tsai is an ally of Alibaba founder Jack Ma, with some former employees describing their relationship as inseparable. Tsai helped Ma secure early investments from Goldman Sachs and SoftBank and supervised Alibaba's initial public offering in New York in 2014. Tsai admitted in 2021 in a tweet that he likes crypto and he reportedly has many links to the United States. He is married with 3 children and graduated from Yale with degrees in economics and law and played lacrosse. He spent nearly 20 years in and around New York, his American English flawless. It was in his late 20s when Tsai began investing, starting with Investor AB, the holding company of Sweden's richest family, the Wallenbergs. 3 years later, Tsai reportedly left his $700,000 a year job in New York for a $50 job in Ma's apartment so they can build Alibaba. Eddie Wu, chairman of the e-commerce unit Taobao and Tmall Group, will succeed Zhang as chief executive officer. Tsai and Zhang, or their new roles, will take effect in September. In Mexico and Colombia, commercial voiceover artists, voice actors, audiobook narrators, and video game narrators fear a common threat. Rani Bayuga tells us more.
The sudden popularity and availability of generative artificial intelligence threatens to displace voice artists, voice actors, and audiobook narrators. Ironically, these talents feed this technology every day, that could take away their livelihood. They are afraid their talent will be displaced by synthetic voices. Worse, they worry that their own will be cloned by artificial intelligence without their consent. AI is capable of creating synthetic voices, barely different from human ones. Voice actor and broadcaster Mario Filio says they are fighting a very big monster. Filio has voiced Will Smith and characters such as Obi-Wan Kenobi of Star Wars, Winnie the Pooh, or Miss Piggy. He says he never received royalties for that success, but he says that is a minor issue compared to the challenge posed by generative AI, which creates text, images, videos, or voices using existing content, all without human intervention. To fight this battle under the slogan, "Don't Steal Our Voices," some 20 unions and unions from Europe, the United States, and Latin America created the Organization of United Voices, or OVU. OVU promotes legislation to harmonize AI and human creation. OVU warns that the indiscriminate and unregulated use of AI can extinguish artistic heritage of creativity that machines cannot generate. Ronnie Bayuga for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Taylor Swift has announced international dates for her record-breaking Eras Tour. This after she unveiled the dates on her social media. The pop star will play 9 shows in the UK, with concerts in Edinburgh, Liverpool, Cardiff, and London, followed by 5 shows in Australia and Brazil. Meanwhile, Japan and Singapore are the only countries that are included in her Asian tour. Sabrina Carpenter will be Taylor's special guest for some shows. The first leg of the tour was in the U.S., where Swift pulled record-setting crowds and a career-spanning set that covered 45 songs in roughly 3.5 hours. Eras is Swift's first world tour since 2018, since she has released 4 new studio albums, including the Grammy Award-winning Folklore. In Argentina, 24 individuals compete as the country's reigning grill master. The competition marks its 5th year, gathering the best grillers across Argentina. The contestants are tasked to grill up traditional Argentine asada. Organizers provided them with the same cuts of meat and extras to use, which included beef, chorizo, sausages, fish, lamb, and vegetables. Argentina is famous for its delicacies like parrillas and asada, and for having some of the best beef in the world.
And that left my tummy grumbling.
Same.
To help you get through this week, here's a quote from Chinese 4-Dan actress and model Zhang Ziyi. People who trust you will not be swayed by what's been said about you, and people who don't, no amount of good reports will persuade them.
This is definitely something I learned in the recent years. It's okay to keep your circle small.
Exactly. Keep a few friends that you can really trust and trust you.
Yes. And that's a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates on our social media channels. I am Gianna Llanes.
I am Nina Richie Alago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Stay tuned for tonight's episode of Counterpoint with Attorney Salvador Panelo and Department of Tourism Secretary Christine Garcia Frasco. Again, this is Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.